The day I discovered my own parents had betrayed me was the day I swore I'd never be their victim again. Even now, I can still hear the ocean waves outside that old beach house. To me, it wasn't just a house. It was my sanctuary, my safe place, the one corner of the world where I thought I belonged. Every wall held a memory. Every floorboard creaked with echoes of my childhood laughter. I grew up believing that no matter how stormy life got, the beach house would always be there. It wasn't just wood and nails. It was the heart of my family. At least, that's what I thought. But families have a way of showing you their true colors when money, property, and power are involved. And mine showed me in the cruelest way. I wasn't the golden child. That was my brother. From as early as I can remember, he wore the crown. He was the one praised, the one spoiled, the one protected at all costs. Me, I was just there, the quiet one, the one expected to step aside, to sacrifice, to understand. My parents never said it out loud, but I knew where I stood in their eyes, a shadow behind his spotlight, and yet I clung to the beach house. It was the only thing that felt like mine, not because anyone gave it to me, but because it was the place where I carved my own identity. I painted my room with my own hands as a teenager. I fixed the leaky roof one summer when no one else bothered. I stayed behind during storms, guarding it like it was a part of me. That house wasn't just bricks and paint. It was my inheritance, not in the legal sense, but in the emotional sense. It held my soul. So imagine the sting when I discovered my parents had other plans that didn't include me. I'll never forget the moment it began to unravel. It was an ordinary afternoon, one of those days when the sea air smelled salty and the sunlight hit just right. I'd stopped by the house to breathe, to escape. But as I walked past the study, I overheard voices. My parents, low, serious, secretive, and though I couldn't make out every word, I heard just enough. He'll be happy when it's done. She doesn't need to know until it's too late. My stomach dropped. Who was he? What didn't I need to know? Why too late? I froze in that hallway, my hand against the wall, my heart pounding in my ears. The voices carried on, weaving fragments of a conversation that felt like knives. The sale will cover it. She'll understand eventually. A sale. That word stuck to me like poison. I didn't confront them right then. Something in me told me to stay quiet, to listen, to wait. Because betrayal doesn't scream in your face all at once. It whispers piece by piece until you see the full picture. But even in those early moments, I knew. My parents, the people who were supposed to protect me, to honor me, to treat me as their child, were plotting something behind my back. Something tied to the house. Something that would shatter the last piece of security I thought I had. I left the study that day in silence, but inside, a storm had already begun. My hands shook as I closed the door behind me. My heart was racing, not just with fear, but with anger. Why? Why would they keep secrets from me? Why would they talk about selling the one place that meant everything to me? Why was it always me who had to understand, while my brother got everything handed to him? Questions piled up in my mind like heavy stones. And behind every question was the same sharp truth. I was about to be betrayed. That night, I lay awake listening to the crash of waves against the shore. I thought of every birthday I'd celebrated in that house. Every summer barbecue. Every late-night talk on the porch. It wasn't just history they were trying to take from me. It was my identity. And the worst part? They didn't even think I deserved to know. They were planning it all in secret, waiting for the perfect moment to shut me out, to replace me, to erase me. I didn't know the full story yet, but my heart already sensed it. My family was choosing my brother over me, again, and this time. It wasn't just about attention or praise. It was about something real, something permanent, something they thought I'd be too weak to fight for. But they underestimated me, because betrayal has a strange way of waking you up. It takes the blindfold off your eyes. It hardens you. I went to sleep that night with a promise burning inside me. If they thought I would just stand by and let it happen, they were wrong. That house was my anchor, my childhood, my dignity, and I was not about to watch it slip away without a fight. So while my parents whispered in shadows, while they thought they were being clever, I was already preparing myself, preparing for the day their secret would spill into the light, and when it did, everything would change. That was the beginning, the first crack in the foundation of what I thought was family, the first step on a path I never imagined I'd walk, a path of betrayal, of heartbreak, of revenge. I didn't know how dark it would get. I didn't know how much I'd have to sacrifice, but I knew one thing for certain. The day I discovered my own parents had betrayed me was the day I swore I'd never be their victim again. again. When I was little, the beach house was more than just a building on the shore. It was the backdrop of my entire childhood. If you close your eyes and picture a place where you felt safe, where the air itself seemed to protect you, that was it for me. I can still see it clearly. White paint peeling from the wooden boards, the porch swing swaying gently in the salty breeze, the sound of gulls circling overhead. The ocean stretched endlessly in front of us as though it were keeping watch. Every summer, every holiday, every family gathering seemed to happen there. I had scraped knees from running barefoot along the deck. I had salty hair and sunburnt cheeks from playing in the water until the sun disappeared. I learned to read in that house, curled up by the window while storms raged outside. I laughed. I cried. I grew up within those walls, but as warm as those memories feel, they were never perfect, because in every corner of that house, behind every happy memory, was a shadow. A shadow cast by my brother. He was older than me by just a couple of years, but in my parents' eyes, that small gap might as well have been a canyon. To them, he was the golden boy, the one who could do no wrong. If he brought home a trophy from school, it went straight to the mantel. If I brought home a drawing I worked on for weeks, it ended up tucked away in a drawer. If he raised his voice at the dinner table, it was passion. If I dared to disagree, it was disrespect. I didn't notice it much as a child. Kids don't always recognize favoritism when it hides inside smiles and laughter. But as I got older, the cracks became harder to ignore. Take the beach house, for example. Every summer, my brother would bring friends over, and the house would transform into his playground. My parents would beam with pride, cooking big meals, treating his friends like family. When I invited friends, suddenly the house was too small. Suddenly, we can't have too many people here. I remember once I spent weeks fixing up an old boat we found washed ashore. I was maybe 12. I patched it, painted it, even managed to make it float again. My dad looked at it once, nodded politely, and went back inside. But when my brother decided to enter a surfing contest that same summer, the whole family rallied. Mom made custom shirts. Dad drove him to practice every day. They cheered until their voices cracked, and I just sat on the porch, watching. The truth was, I was used to being overlooked, being second choice, being the one expected to compromise. But despite it all, the beach house felt like mine. Not because my parents said so, but because I claimed it in my own quiet way. While my brother left to chase adventures, I stayed behind and took care of it. I cleaned the windows. I repaired the fence when storms knocked it down. I painted the shutters year after year, even when nobody asked me to. It was as if the house and I understood each other. Both of us weathered storms. Both of us were taken for granted. Both of us stood quietly in the background waiting to be noticed. And maybe that's why I loved it so much. Because even if my parents couldn't see my worth, the house did. Still, there were moments when the favoritism cut deeper than usual, like the Christmas when I gave my parents a hand-carved frame I'd spent months working on. I'd stayed up late after school, shaping it, sanding it, painting it just right. They smiled, thanked me, and set it aside. But when my brother walked in with an expensive store-bought watch he'd saved up for, they practically cried with joy. Or the time I got accepted into a local art program, something I had dreamed of for years. My parents congratulated me with a half-hearted, "That's nice," but when my brother mentioned wanting to study business, they threw a party, inviting neighbors, cooking a feast, celebrating as if he'd already conquered the world. It wasn't just favoritism. It was a message, whispered over and over. He matters more. You'll understand. But no matter how much it hurt, I held on to the house. It was my refuge. When my parents' voices stung and my brother's spotlight burned too bright, I'd escape to the attic. I'd sit by the little round window, watching the tide rise and fall. I'd tell myself, "This is yours. No one can take this from you." Of course, I didn't know how wrong I was, because the very people I trusted, the very people who smiled at me under that roof, who posed for family photos on that porch, were quietly planning to take it away. Looking back, maybe I should have seen the signs, the little comments my parents made, the way they brushed off my attachment to the house as sentimental, the way they'd glance at my brother whenever money or property came up in conversation. But I was naive. I thought loyalty mattered. I thought love mattered. I thought family mattered. It wasn't until that day in the hallway, the day I overheard whispers about sales and secrets, that it hit me. The house I had loved, protected, and practically raised with my own two hands wasn't mine in their eyes. It was just an asset, a tool, a way to give my brother yet another advantage. And me? I was never part of their plan. That realization dug deep, because this wasn't about a roof or walls. This was about everything the house represented. My memories, my sacrifices, my worth. It was about years of being second best, years of being invisible, years of swallowing my pride while they praised my brother, and suddenly, all those subtle cracks in my childhood, all those moments I brushed off as just how it is, came flooding back, sharper than ever. I realized that betrayal doesn't just appear overnight. It builds slowly, layer by layer, like waves carving into stone, until one day the stone breaks. That day was coming for me, and when it did, it would change everything. It started as whispers in the hallway, but whispers have a way of growing louder once your ears are trained to hear them. After that day in the study, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I became hyper-aware. Every look between my parents, every pause in conversation when I walked into the room, every sudden subject change, it all felt like clues, like pieces of a puzzle they thought I'd never solve. And then, I did. One evening, I returned to the beach house earlier than expected. My parents were sitting at the dining table, papers spread across the wood I had polished 1,000 times before. They were so deep in conversation they didn't hear me at first. "This will cover the tuition and living expenses," my father said, "plus the down payment for the new condo," my mother added. "He'll finally have the start he deserves." My stomach twisted. There it was again. Always he. I stood frozen in the doorway, my breath shallow until my mother noticed me. She jumped as if caught in a crime, quickly sliding a folder shut. "Oh, you're home early," she said, her voice a shade too bright. I didn't say a word. My eyes darted to the papers just enough to catch the words in bold, "Property Sale Agreement." My heart dropped into my stomach. I wanted to believe I'd misunderstood, that maybe it was about something else. But deep down, I knew. They were selling the beach house, selling my house, and not just selling it to fund my brother's future, his tuition, his condo, his dreams. It felt like the air had been punched out of me. That night, I locked myself in my old room, the room I had painted with my own hands, the room that still smelled faintly of salt and pine from the wood beams. I pressed my back against the door and let the weight sink in. I wasn't just being overlooked this time. I was being erased. Every nail I hammered into the porch, every storm I braved to protect the shutters, every moment I spent pouring my soul into that house, none of it mattered. In their eyes, it was never mine. It was just currency. Currency for him, my brother, the chosen one, the son whose name rolled off their tongues like a hymn, the one who could do no wrong, who always needed more, who always received more. And me? Was I ever really their child? Or was I just a placeholder until he needed more of what they could take from me? The next morning at breakfast, I tried to act normal. I tried to smile, to sip my coffee, to pretend I hadn't seen the papers. But inside, my chest was burning. My father cleared his throat and looked at me carefully. "You've always been the strong one," he said, "the understanding one." I froze. Those words, understanding one, they weren't a compliment. They were a warning. They were the beginning of the speech I knew too well. "You'll see, it's for the good of the family," he continued. "Your brother has an opportunity we can't waste. This is the best choice for all of us." All of us. No, this was for him. Only him. I swallowed hard, my spoon trembling in my hand. I wanted to scream, to demand why my happiness was always negotiable while his was sacred. But I didn't. Not yet. Because a voice in my head whispered, "Wait, listen, watch." Over the next few days, I noticed more. Quiet phone calls, more documents slipped into folders, discussions about realtors and closing dates. Each detail was like a knife, twisting deeper. It wasn't just the betrayal of losing the house, it was the betrayal of losing my place in the family entirely. The beach house had always been the symbol of us, of who we were together. If they could give that away so easily, then what did that make me? Disposable, replaceable, forgotten, and worst of all, they didn't even seem guilty. My mother hummed as she cooked dinner. My father talked casually about new beginnings. My brother, of course, beamed with excitement, talking about his bright future as though it were already his. Not once did they ask me how I felt. Not once did they wonder what it would mean to me, because they didn't need to ask. They already knew, and they didn't care. One night, unable to sleep, I wandered down to the shoreline. The moonlight stretched across the waves, silver and cold. I stared at the house behind me, its windows glowing softly in the dark. Memories flickered in my mind. birthday candles flickering on the porch, summer storms rattling the shutters while I read by the attic window, laughter echoing through the halls even if I wasn't always part of it. How could they sell this? How could they strip away everything I had left? Tears stung my eyes, but beneath them was something hotter, stronger, anger, not the kind that fades overnight, the kind that grows roots. Because betrayal like this, it doesn't just hurt, it transforms you. I knew then that I had a choice. I could remain the quiet one, the understanding one, the shadow behind the golden boy's light. I could swallow the pain like I always did, watch the house get sold, and let them erase me completely. Or I could fight back. For the first time in my life, I realized something powerful. I didn't have to accept their decision. I didn't have to be the victim of their choices. I could make my own. That night, standing barefoot in the sand, I swore an oath to myself. If they want a battle over this house, then I'll give them one. And this time, I'll be the one who wins. But even as I made that promise, part of me grieved. Because I knew that once I took that step, there would be no going back. This wasn't just about property anymore. This was about love, loyalty, and blood ties, all about to be shattered. And as much as I hated to admit it, I could already feel it slipping. My family was breaking apart. What I didn't know then was just how far I would go, just how much I would lose, and just how much they would regret underestimating me. Because the quiet one, the overlooked one, was about to become the one they never forgot. If the whispers and secret documents weren't enough, what came next left no room for doubt. My parents weren't hiding it anymore. They weren't even trying. It started with small comments at the dinner table, dropped casually like pebbles into deep water. "We'll all benefit from this in the long run," my father said one night, his eyes fixed firmly on my brother. "This will give the family a fresh start," my mother added, her smile soft, but her words sharp. The family. I sat there with my fork suspended in midair, wondering when I'd stopped being part of that definition. And then, of course, my brother chimed in, confident, smug, certain of his place at the center of their world. "You'll see, it's better this way," he said. "I'll finally be able to do something meaningful. And you don't really need the house anyway." The words hit me like a slap. Don't really need the house, as though it were nothing but empty walls to me. As though every memory, every ounce of love I'd poured into it was invisible. At first, I tried to reason with them. I tried to make them understand. "Do you realize what this house means to me?" I asked, my voice trembling. "It's not just property, it's our history, our family. My life has been built inside these walls." My mother sighed, her expression patient, almost pitying. "You'll understand one day. This is what's best for the family." There it was again, that word, family, always a shield, always an excuse. But what they really meant was him. What was best for him? My father leaned forward, his tone stern but calm, the way he always got when he wanted to end an argument before it began. "Your brother has a future to build. You'll always find your way. You don't need the same kind of support he does." I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask why his future mattered more than mine. Why my dreams were somehow less valid, less urgent, less deserving of their protection. But the words caught in my throat, because I already knew the answer. In their eyes, I was strong enough to survive without them, and he was not, and somehow that made me expendable. The days that followed blurred together into a haze of quiet betrayal. I would walk into the kitchen and hear my mother on the phone with a realtor, her voice hushed but cheerful. I'd sit on the porch and watch my father showing my brother financial documents, explaining details like a mentor grooming his heir. And me? They barely spoke to me anymore, as though I'd already been written out of the script. The beach house that had always felt like my sanctuary was suddenly a cage. Every corner whispered lies. Every wall seemed to echo with their choice, a choice that did not include me. I felt powerless, invisible, discarded. One evening, I found myself standing in the living room, staring at the family photos lining the mantel. There we all were, smiling, hugging, pretending to be whole. There was one picture in particular, me and my brother, maybe 8 and 10 years old, sitting on the porch steps. I remembered that day. I'd been so excited because it was the first time Dad let me hold the fishing pole. But when the photo was taken, everyone's arms were wrapped around my brother, cheering his big catch while I sat quietly at the edge, cropped half out of the frame, and suddenly it hit me. Nothing had changed. Not really. I had always been on the edge, always cropped out, always the afterthought. This house, the one thing I thought I could truly truly call mine was just another reminder that I was never really the chosen one. The confrontation came soon after. Walked into the dining room to find my parents and my brother seated around the table, papers spread out again. My father looked up, his expression calm but firm. "It's settled," he said. "We found a buyer. The house will be gone by the end of the month." My chest tightened. "And you didn't think I deserved a say in this?" My mother's eyes softened in that patronizing way, the way she looked at me when I was a child throwing what she called tantrums. "Honey, this isn't against you," she said. "It's for your brother, for the family's future, for the family." The words rang in my ears like poison. I turned to my brother, hoping, foolishly, that he might defend me, that maybe he'd see what this was doing to me, but he just smirked. "Don't make this harder than it has to be. You'll understand someday." Understand. That word again. It wasn't understanding they wanted from me. It was silence. It was obedience. It was acceptance that I was less. In that moment, something inside me broke, not like glass shattering loudly, but like ice cracking slowly under weight. Unstoppable, inevitable. I realized that I wasn't just losing a house. I was losing the illusion I'd been holding on to my whole life. The illusion that if I worked hard enough, loved deeply enough, stayed patient long enough, I would finally matter to them. But I didn't. Not then. Not ever. And as I stood there, their words swirling around me like knives, I felt the emotional climax of betrayal rise in my chest. A betrayal so complete, so undeniable, it left me breathless. I wasn't part of their vision for the future. I wasn't part of their definition of family. I was nothing but a placeholder, and they had just proven it. That night, I sat alone in the attic, staring out of the small round window at the waves crashing against the shore. My fists clenched, my body trembling. I felt powerless, yes. But beneath that powerlessness, something else was stirring. Anger. Not the fleeting kind. Not the kind you shout and then forget. This was deeper, sharper. A fire that began in the pit of my stomach and spread slowly, deliberately, and with that fire came clarity. If they were willing to discard me so easily, then I had no reason to keep playing the role they'd written for me. If I was invisible to them, then I was free. Free to act in ways they'd never see coming. They thought I was powerless, but they were wrong. They had no idea what I was about to do. After that night in the attic, something inside me shifted. The tears had dried. The helplessness had faded. What remained was sharper, colder, a clarity I had never felt before. If they thought I'd stay silent, they were wrong. For my whole life I had been the quiet one, the understanding one, the shadow. But shadows have power too. While everyone else looks at the spotlight, shadows move silently, unseen, until it's too late. That was going to be me. I started small. I began by gathering information, listening more carefully than ever. My parents had grown careless now that they believed I had accepted my fate. They left documents out on the counter, made calls in the next room, whispered less when they thought I wasn't listening. I picked up fragments here and there. The buyer's name, the realtor's schedule, the planned closing date. Each detail was like a puzzle piece falling into place, but I knew knowledge alone wasn't enough. If I wanted to stop them, I needed power, legal power. So, quietly, I made my first move. I scheduled a meeting with a lawyer in town. Not one of the high-profile names my family used, but someone discreet. Someone who knew the local property laws inside and out. Walking into that office felt like stepping into a different world. For the first time, I wasn't the overlooked child begging for scraps of attention. I was the client, the decision-maker, the one with the plan. I laid everything out, the house, my connection to it, the whispers of a sale happening behind my back. The lawyer listened carefully, tapping his pen against the desk. Then he asked the question that changed everything. Whose name is on the deed? I held my breath. Mine. They transferred it to me years ago for tax purposes. A slow smile spread across his face. Then they can't sell it without you. Legally. You're in control. The words sent a jolt through me. Control. For the first time in weeks, maybe years, I felt it. I walked out of that office with a plan forming in my mind, sharper and clearer with every step. If they wanted to treat me like I was invisible, I'd show them just how dangerous invisibility could be. They thought I would stand by and watch while they erased me. Instead, I would move first. I would sell the house on my own terms, quietly, swiftly, before they even realized what was happening. And when the moment came, when they discovered what I had done, They would finally understand what it felt like to be powerless. The days that followed were filled with secret preparation. While my parents and brother celebrated their imaginary victory, I met quietly with potential buyers. I reviewed contracts. I researched every angle, every loophole, every safeguard. I learned quickly that revenge isn't about rage. It's about patience, discipline, precision. Each meeting, each signature, each detail was like laying bricks in a fortress they couldn't tear down. And through it all, I said nothing. I smiled at dinner. I nodded when my parents spoke about family sacrifices. I even listened as my brother described his future condo as though it were already his. Inside, though, I was miles ahead of them. They were playing checkers. I was playing chess. There were moments of doubt, of course. Nights when I lay awake, wondering if I was making a mistake. Wondering if revenge would really heal the wound or only deepen it. But then I would think of the betrayal, of my mother's patronizing smile, of my father's dismissive tone, of my brother's smirk when he told me I didn't need the house. And every time, the doubt burned away, leaving only determination. They had taken so much from me already, my place in the family, my worth in their eyes, my childhood innocence. I wouldn't let them take this too, not without a fight. One evening, as I sat in the study reviewing papers, I whispered to myself, "This is mine," not because they gave it to me, not because they approved, but because I fought for it, because I claimed it. The words settled into my chest like steel. I wasn't doing this out of greed. I wasn't doing it out of spite. I was doing it because I had no other choice, because if I didn't stand up for myself now, I never would. This was about more than a house. It was about reclaiming my power, my dignity, my place in a story I had been written out of too many times before. The plan was simple, but deadly effective. Step 1. Finalize the sale without my parents' knowledge. Step 2. Sign the deed over to the buyer. Step 3. Reveal the truth when it was too late for them to undo it. By the time they realized, the house would be gone. The deal would be sealed. The future they had planned so carefully for my brother would crumble in their hands, and in that moment, they would finally understand. I was not the weak one. I was not the expendable one. I was the one with the power. The night before I signed the final papers, I stood once more on the porch, staring out at the ocean. The waves crashed against the shore, steady and relentless as if they were cheering me on. I felt calm. Not the calm of peace, but the calm before a storm. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for their approval. I wasn't hoping they would finally see me. I wasn't begging for scraps of love. I was taking control, and the quiet one they had overlooked for so long was about to make the loudest move of all. The day I signed the papers, the sky was clear, as if the world itself had permission to breathe. I woke early, steady, and deliberate, like someone about to perform a task they had rehearsed 1,000 times in their head. There was no trembling now, only a tight, certain focus. I dressed simply. No drama, no theatrics. Revenge, I had learned, doesn't need flair. It needs timing. It needs silence. It needs to be done cleanly so when the sound comes, it lands. The lawyer met me in a small, impersonal office downtown. He slid the stack of documents across the table with the efficiency of someone who had seen too many human dramas play out on paper. I signed where I needed to sign. I initialed where I needed to initial. Every stroke of the pen felt like a reclamation. When the final signature was inked and the clerk stamped the papers, there was a small, almost ridiculous sound of rubber on paper, a tiny, mundane noise that made my throat tighten. That tiny noise sealed 1,000 moments of being overlooked. That tiny sound was a pivot in my life. As I walked out of the building, the sun hit my face and I felt oddly light, not triumphant, not joyous, just resolved. The real work had been done. The rest was waiting back at the house. The reveal, the reckoning, the moment they would finally understand what betrayal had set in motion. He drove to the beach house slowly. The road ribboned along the coastline and the ocean looked ordinary, indifferent, as if it hadn't known the quiet storm it had witnessed for years. I parked down the lane and walked up the path, each step steady. I turned the key and opened the door to the familiar scent of salt and old wood, the same scent that had comforted me as a child. For a second, it felt like nothing had changed. Then I looked at the mantel, at the family photos, and realized how irrational that feeling was. Nothing would ever be the same. I waited for them to come home. I set the kettle on, put on a record we used to play on lazy afternoons, and made the house look like any other day, because I wanted the contrast to be sharp. I wanted the ordinary to make the truth that followed feel like a cold slap. When they walked in, they were chatty, already halfway into their plans. My brother carried a box sample of condo tiles, talking about grout and lighting like a man who already owned the future. Their voices filled the house with a casual certainty that made my skin crawl. I let them talk. I let them smile. I let them believe they had already won. "Why do you look like that?" my mother asked lightly as she hung her coat. "Everything okay?" my father added. I took a breath. I let their questions hang in the air like invitations. Then I put the kettle down and looked at them. I felt every memory in the room like a living thing pressed to my chest. "I signed the papers this morning," I said. For a few heartbeats, nothing happened. Their smiles faltered like a doorway closing. "You what?" my brother asked, voice sliding into alarm. "The house," I continued, my voice calm and steady, the kind of calm that makes people listen. "It's been sold." My father laughed at first, a nervous, disbelieving sound. "Sold? To who?" he asked. "We were just about to our buyer," I said. "It's already closed." The air in the room turned viscous. My mother's face went blank, then pale. My brother's grin dropped and left his face like a mask falling away. For a moment, they all just stared at me as if I had spoken in an unfamiliar language. "You can't do that," my mother said finally, a tremor of panic threading her words. "It's our house, our family. It wasn't mine to give away," I replied softly. "It was mine to protect." Their arguments came like flurries, protests, accusations, bargaining, but they felt small and clumsy against what had already been done. "You can try to stop the tide after it turns. You cannot unring a bell." My brother circled me first, anger flickering in his eyes. "How could you? We needed that money. We planned this for months. We planned in secret," my father added, the old authority in his voice trying to recover control. You thought you could do this without me?" I cut in. "You thought you could decide what's best for the family without even telling me." My words hit a tender spot and they knew it. They flailed for the old scripts, the family, the sacrifice, the future, but the lines felt hollow now. Those words had been used to justify everything that led me here. They were what I had to dismantle. The confrontation grew tense and loud, then quiet as everyone's breath shortened. My mother looked at me as if the little child she'd once held had suddenly grown a backbone she never saw coming. My father, usually a man of impenetrable calm, ran a hand through his hair like someone trying to collect a frayed rope. "You're being selfish," my brother accused, his voice turning rough. "You're destroying our opportunity." "You call this selfish?" I asked. "You're selling a lifetime of my memories like they're currency. You're using the house to build him up while breaking me down. If that's what you call selfish, then maybe I finally understand what you've been doing for years." His face went red. I could see the realization unfold like slow lava, that this wasn't a mistake or a misunderstanding, but intentional defiance. His anger sharpened into something he couldn't swallow. "You always did this," my mother whispered, more sorrow than accusation now. "You always thought you were owed something." I nearly laughed at that. Owed, as if I hadn't spent my years proving I belonged in ways they chose to ignore. "I'm not owed," I said. "I'm standing up." For a moment, none of us spoke. The weight of what I'd done settled like dust in the rooms we'd once shared. Their shock had a physical presence, a dull, heavy cloud that thickened the air, and in that silence, I felt the shift. The power had moved. It wasn't brazen or cruel, it was quietly absolute. I had been dismissed for years, but I had used that invisibility to move unseen, to act, to take ownership of my life. They were speechless because the narrative had collapsed. Their plan, one they'd threaded together in secrecy, was gone. Their certainty had been broken, and that hurt them in a way none of their speeches ever would. It removed the pedestal they'd built around my brother and exposed the choices they had made. My brother left the room first, slamming the door so hard the picture frames trembled. My father sat down slowly, his hands folded like a man who suddenly had to figure out how to be just a man and not the head of an empire. My mother's eyes met mine, raw, stunned, searching for the child she thought she knew. "You'll regret this," my father said finally, voice low. "Maybe," I answered. "Or maybe you'll finally see what you lost when you made him the center of everything." They had wanted me to be understanding, to be the adult in the room, to be the one who accepted sacrifice. But what they hadn't expected was for their sacrifice to be rejected, for the person they thought would always bend to the will of the family to choose themselves. The day days after the sale were a strange aftershock. The house was packed up and keys were handed over. Movers came and went. The buyer's car pulled away, and the porch felt emptier than I'd ever imagined. I had won the battle, but the silence that followed tasted of something like grief. I had shifted the balance of power. Yes, they were left with the humiliation of being outmaneuvered. They were left to face the consequences of their own cruelty. But I also felt a hollow victory. A place once filled with memory was leaving, and no legal win could fully replace that. Still, in the moments when the ache threatened to overwhelm me, I reminded myself why I'd done it. Not to hurt them for sport, but to reclaim myself, to send a message that I would not be erased quietly, to take back the dignity they had refused to give me. The power had shifted. For the first time, I wasn't invisible in my own family's story. I wasn't the afterthought. I was the actor who forced a scene change. And as painful as the fallout would be, as fractured as the family might become, there was something else too, a trembling, cautious pride that I had finally chosen myself. The fallout was not immediate fireworks. It was a slow burn, a smoldering collapse of everything that had once looked like family. The first days after the sale were filled with frantic calls. My phone lit up with messages, missed calls, voicemails ranging from angry demands to trembling guilt. I listened to none of them. I couldn't. I knew if I heard my mother's voice or my father's tone, they would try to pull me back into their orbit, to make me doubt the choice I had already made. But when I finally walked into their house a week later, the damage was plain. My brother was the first to speak. He didn't look like the man who once gloated about condo tiles and floor-to-ceiling windows. His eyes were bloodshot, his voice raw. "You ruined me," he spat, his words heavy with disbelief more than anger. "That money was my future. That house was supposed to be mine. How could you do this?" The truth sat on my tongue, bitter and simple. "Because it was never yours." His jaw tightened. He had no script for this. All his life, he had been handed what he wanted. All his life, doors had opened because my parents held them wide for him. And now, for the first time, the door had closed. Not by accident, not by fate, but by me. My father was worse. He didn't shout. He didn't rage. He looked at me like a man betrayed by his own reflection. His silence cut deeper than any word. Finally, he asked, voice low and trembling with suppressed fury, "Do you understand what you've done?" I nodded, completely. This family, I interrupted, was willing to erase me, to strip away the one thing I had left that was mine. "You talk about family as though it's sacred, but you broke it long before I did." The words hung heavy, undeniable. His lips pressed into a thin line, and for the first time in my life, he had no retort, no lecture, no authority. My mother wept. She didn't weep like a woman who had lost a home. She wept like someone whose carefully constructed illusions had shattered. She reached for me, her fingers trembling, her eyes searching for the child she thought she still controlled. "Why couldn't you just trust us?" she whispered. "Because trust goes both ways," I answered. "And you gave all of yours to him." She flinched. Her hand dropped. She had no defense left. The cracks between us widened with every passing minute. Words flew like debris, selfish, cruel, heartless, not from me, but at me. They wanted me to feel guilt, to buckle under the weight of their disappointment. But for the first time in my life, their words didn't pierce. I looked at them, my furious father, my devastated brother, my broken mother, and I realized something that felt both painful and liberating. They weren't my whole world anymore. Their anger didn't define me. Their disappointment didn't crush me. Their betrayal no longer controlled me. For once, I wasn't the forgotten one. I wasn't the expendable one. I wasn't the shadow waiting to be acknowledged. I was the one they couldn't control. The victory was not sweet. It wasn't joyful. It didn't feel like winning the lottery or catching a dream. It was heavier than that, weighted with years of silence, years of swallowing pain. It was justice, cold, uncompromising, necessary, and justice doesn't come with smiles or celebrations. It comes with silence, with aftermath, with a bittersweet ache that reminds you what you had to lose in order to stand tall. In the weeks that followed, the house sat empty, a ghost of our history. My parents stopped inviting me to family dinners. My brother avoided me in town. Conversations became clipped, mechanical, brittle. The family that once claimed, "We stick together," had splintered. The cracks they created by choosing him over me had finally broken into a canyon no one could cross. And strangely, I wasn't afraid of the emptiness anymore, because while I had lost their approval, their warmth, even their presence, I had gained something I had never had before, the strength to say no, the strength to be more than their afterthought. The climax wasn't a scene of triumph. It was a scene of endings. Endings of illusions, endings of blind loyalty, endings of the story where I played the victim. I had stepped into a new role, one that demanded sacrifice, one that came with loneliness, but one that belonged fully to me. And as painful as it was to watch my family unravel, I knew this truth. Sometimes, the only way to survive betrayal is to return it. The house was gone. The papers were signed. The deal was sealed, and yet, the silence it left behind was louder than I had imagined. I walked past the beach one last time after handing over the keys. The waves still rose and fell, steady and timeless, as though they had no interest in the wars of families or the wounds of children. The tide didn't care that betrayal had lived inside those walls, or that justice had been carved out of pain. Nature simply continued, as it always had, teaching me something I hadn't realized before. Closure doesn't come with grand fireworks. It comes with acceptance. In the quiet weeks that followed, I thought often about what I had done. Did revenge heal me? No, not completely. There were nights when the ache of what I'd lost pressed heavy on my chest. Memories of summers in that house, laughter around the fireplace, the childish hope that one day I'd truly belong. Those memories hurt in ways no legal victory could erase. But revenge had done something else. It had given me back control. It had taken me from the shadows where I had been ignored and placed me firmly in the light of my own story. For the first time, my life was not dictated by their favoritism, their choices, or their manipulation. For the first time, I had written the ending. I didn't celebrate my win. There were no toasts, no dances, no trophies. The victory was quieter, deeper, and more personal. It was in the way I could look in the mirror without feeling invisible. It was in the way I could walk into a room without lowering my voice. It was in the way I no longer needed their approval to breathe. The family had cracked. Yes, the bonds were frayed, perhaps beyond repair. But when love comes without respect, it is not truly love. When loyalty demands silence, it is not truly loyalty. And when a family chooses one child by discarding another, it is not truly a family at all. That was the lesson I carried with me. Sometimes people think revenge is about hurting someone else, but I learned it's really about reclaiming the parts of yourself they tried to take away. My family tried to erase me. I answered by proving I could not be erased. They wanted me silent. I chose to speak through action. They wanted me weak. I showed them my strength. They wanted me forgotten. And instead, I became unforgettable. In the end, I didn't lose my family. They lost me. And perhaps that was the greatest justice of all.